Oft wirken sie wie Fragmente, leicht hingeworfene Blütenblätter, die sich beim genaueren Hinschauen als ganze Blüten entpuppen, quasi im Betrachten zu Blumen werden. Die Künstlerin, Designerin und Malerin Anna Deller-Yee erforscht in ihrer Arbeit die Essenz von Blumen. Immer und immer wieder hat sie gemalt, auf Papier, Leinwand, Stoff. Mit nur 27 Jahren engagierte die italienische Luxusmarke Marni in Mailand sie als Designerin für Women's Wear. Schwerpunkt Malerei. Seitdem hat sie für Nike, Mugler und die Vogue gearbeitet, mittlerweile selbstständig. Welche Verbindungen und Unterschiede sie zwischen Kunst und Mode herausgearbeitet hat, darum geht es in dieser Folge. Mein Name ist Sarah Marie Plikat. Hallo.
Kunst und Leben, der Monopol-Podcast von Detektor.fm.
Seit Anfang Juli zeigt Anna Deller-Yee ihre erste Solo-Ausstellung in Berlin. To Build a Home is To bei Jäger Art unweit von der Bernauer Straße. Elke Buhr, Chefredakteurin des Monopol-Magazins, hat sich mit Anna Deller-Yee und Francesco Risso zum Gespräch verabredet. Es geht unter anderem um die Kapitalisierung von Kunst und Mode und zornige Blumen.
Guys, I'm so happy to be here with you. I'm talking to Francesco Risso. Francesco, where are you?
I'm in Milan right now in my studio, yeah.
Okay, great. And to Anna Deller-Yee. Anna, where are you?
I'm currently in Berlin, also sitting in, let's say, my studio / like the room where I work in my flat.
Okay, great. I'm also in Berlin. And Anna, I saw you in Berlin actually last week because you opened your very, very first gallery show as an artist, and Francesco curated it. Please, but that's not the only thing that connects you. So what is your relationship? How do you work together, Anna?
So you want me to answer that first? That's
First.
difficult. I
First
wish
you?
Francesco could answer that first. So, I mean, I can expand like a little bit in this question. So like Francesco and I met for the first time in 2021 after I finished studying at the RCA, which is the Royal College of Art in London. It's a design school. And I was called like basically a week after I had graduated from the course back in 2021, and I was asked it was a headhunter from the OTB group, but I was asked then confidentially about joining the Marni team. And 2 months later, I was living in Milan, and I met Francesco for the first time as a junior women's wear designer on his team. Yeah. We worked together there for correct me if I'm wrong, I think, what is it now, 3.5?
I have a problem with numbers.
Okay. Okay.
I just know that it's many cycles of thoughts. So
yeah, exactly. So I mean, if I'm correctly calculating now, I think it's been like 3.5 to 4 years that we've been working together. I think what was special about joining the team of Francesco's Marni was that it wasn't just, me designing clothes in the beginning, but I got to paint, I got to do something that I feel super passionate about. And Francesco welcomed me, I have the feeling, with open arms into his team with, let's say, the more unconventional skill set that I have within the design field, yeah.
So, Francesco, what was interesting about Anna when you first met her?
Well, apart for her incredible charisma, which is, it's something that immediately kind of strikes you as beauty to me. And normally I'm very attracted by people that have that kind of strength in their physical appearance, in their way they move, in the way they talk. So that was immediately, for me, something very intriguing. And I love to be surrounded by people like her that can actually inform a work that is about, how culturally we make clothes, we move around society. So that for sure was one thing. But then, like, the masterful surprise was, the use of her hand. And that for sure is the thing that, locked her in. And it is true that Anna has... not just she's like I would say a warrior, because she has the capability to work so fast and with such strong commitment, but also like the way she can really explore the way paint, the way design I think that is an incredible quality. And this is something that I am more and more intrigued when I look for people, is not necessarily people that are aiming to become some kind of like creative supervisor of some sort. This is not the way our team is built, but it's more how each person has an incredible talent and how each one of us can share that and learn from each other. And she definitely has one.
So if I understand that right, she was literally painting in the Marnie studio and on your clothes. Like how can painting find a place in the way you
In
work?
different ways, actually. It was not just like painting on clothes. That's I don't want to say it's diminishing, but it's like a quarter of what she would do. Let's say for us, every collection was about evolving towards a certain thought or a center or a certain place where we would find each other towards making something to express emotions, thoughts, making clothes that would be treasured by people. And that's a big mission. And so our hand didn't just come to paint clothes. Our hand came closer to our thoughts, closer to our thinking, to understand where we were going. So the gesture could have been more fauve, let's say, or could have been more controlled. That would help me and the rest of the team to understand where we were going with the gesture of anything, of the prints, of the patterns, of the textures, of a drape. So she was a fundamental, she is, and she was, because now I'm no longer at Marnie, but a fundamental part of this great evolution of the thoughts. And then she would also paint on clothes. She would also paint on one-of-a-kind pieces. She would also make hundreds of paintings for us to decide how many ever prints we would explore. So it was very extended, her job.
That's true, yeah.
Anna, for you, like, how can you describe the tension between like fashion and painting for you?
Well, I think what Francesco just described is I would say a pretty accurate description that I probably couldn't even have come up with, because I sometimes get a little bit lost in like some kind of wormholes that I go down in terms of painting and textiles and so on. But it's actually true. Like there was such a breadth within the work. Like it wasn't just, painting on clothes. It was much more than that. It was really about this gesture that we were trying to find together. And I think in terms of that, maybe before I started at Marnie and working together with Francesco, I had maybe more of a limited horizon in terms of that. So I had, maybe this more one-dimensional, two-dimensional thought, okay, clothing and art and painting and so on. But like, it's much more than that. Like, it's literally like Francesco just said, like, it's about finding this gesture. And I think the connection between both of them, because for me, like painting, making clothes, the human body, the way we present ourselves, like it's all about like us as humans and our existence in this world. So it's like our connection with what is out there and the connection of what is out there with us, So like that's what it is for me. It's like much larger than just, what we put on our bodies, or what like I take a paintbrush and I don't know what, make a paint splash across a canvas. Like for me, it's much more than that. Like really, it has to do much more with, I think, our identities as human beings in this world. And yeah, how we connect with each other, and I think like our emotions, not just with each other, but with ourselves. So I hope that makes sense.
Totally. So when I understand that right, there seems to be a lot of space for artistic thoughts and artistic way of working in the way you worked with Marnie. But is there still a difference between arts and working for the fashion industry?
Of course, there is.
And what is it?
I mean, in terms of how, let's say, both are marketed right now in this particular moment, there's not much of a difference, to be honest, because unfortunately, both let's say, both practices are art has become very, very marketed in the last year, in the last period. There's nothing anymore that feels political. There's nothing anymore that feels like it's made for people to reflect, or rather for people to buy and sell. So unfortunately, art has become more and more closer to fashion, rather than fashion having become more high as art would be. So I do not like to kind of like put them close anyway, because one, it's based on a everyday's need to actually dress and walk in the streets, and and has a certain type of practicality that art doesn't really have. So it's a different type of approach for sure. And I never, even though making the craziest pieces, I never thought I was trying to make fashion into a piece of art. Absolutely not. What we were trying to do, because for us was very important, the strength of the work of the studio as a celebration of craft, was to kind of celebrate each hand, each talent, each person, like Anna or other people in the studio doing other meticulous and very, very, very crafty and very, very important things on the garments, was literally to try to exalt that as a gesture of connecting people towards a more human touch on how things are made, and less maybe mass marketed, something that it connects with you when you go to the store and you ask yourself, oh, what actually is happening there? Are, clothes that actually, where emotions are delivered, that feels that they're lived, that they have a life on their own. And and in a way, for me, art can be, it's very different, the approach. It's we should aim, when we make art, to express big emotions, and it can be much more individual. It can be unfortunately, it became way more static than it used to be. So let's say the connection, it's only maybe in the way the practice can be similar. Let's say, to get to that point, there can be very similar, to get to that piece or to get to that garment, there can be very similar approaches in a studio. And yes, maybe we had become very artistic in the way we have made things, but we haven't made art. we have made clothes.
And Anna,
It's
Anna makes
she
art.
does both. So Anna, can you describe what's the difference for you?
Well, just listening to Francesco like talk now, like there's like, there's, I can totally like get his perspective, and there's really like, from what you're saying, Fra, that like there's like so many points that I totally agree with. I think like from, when I look at it from my perspective, since like if we take it back to like the position that I was also having in your team as I don't even want to call myself just a print designer, but like all the things that I did that had to do with like this gesture, with the hand, with paint. Like, of course, for me and my like way of working, like there was automatically a link to art. Also, just all the references that I was looking at, maybe like other people whose like hands like were inspiring. Like for me, it was about that. So in terms of like the way that I work and the way that I was working on your team, of course, there was a correlation, let's say, in between these two worlds. I think the way that I also work and, my own practice as an artist, I have this perhaps somewhat naive and utopic view that I maybe through my gesture, through my hand, can move the things that we put on our bodies into a context where we perceive them more as something artistic. But I don't necessarily, see it as something that's like, oh, it's like a piece of art, but more like it's about making people dream again. And I think that's what you also are talking about.
They were symbols.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a little bit of a story. I always got very passionate about certain type of craftsmanship, like for instance of the 50s, in the 50s or even in the 20s, or like even if you go and look like even today, like incredible kimonos in Japan are all hand painted. So there's something I've always been very intrigued by, that sort of like technicalities on fabrics. And I remember one of the first shows where actually there was like half of the show was like almost like entirely hand painted. I got very, very criticized because, people were like, oh, you're not going to sell it, blah, 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 blah. And actually we insisted and we insisted and we insisted. And it became every piece, like from the hardest one to the most easy in a way, when maybe the hand paint would be kind of like more of just like, a little flower on a beautiful dress. They became a reality for us, and they became actually a commercial reality. And we managed to provide companies around Italy that still have the potentiality to do all of that, people that have to actually mimic and copy Anna's hand or our hand, to reproduce all of those hand paintings. And it is a typical thing. In the 50s it was very much used. We've only become more poor in the way we treat clothes, and we just sell it for much more money. So in a way, for me, again, the craziest piece, the ones that would look more like a one-of-a-kind impossible thing to make, they were symbols to mark a territory that to me was important to gain back in terms of how things are made. And Anna was incredible in the making of that. She really helped us like improve the hand and explore in a way in which I wasn't personally. I wasn't even able. Like, I was impressed, and still I'm shocked by. She has her own style, obviously, but her knowledge is like, sometimes I was shocked by the way she could go so like brainy and like so precise and schematic, almost like a Liechtenstein like pop drawing that seemed that was made from by a computer, and to go completely on the opposite spectrum, or making like Renaissance like flowers. Like I this still kind of like blows me away.
But I think you also pushed me in that direction, like without you and, without, let's say, like getting an insight into perhaps the things that you've been looking at and that inspire you, I probably would have never gone in these directions. That's the thing, like I would have never looked at these things. It's like kind of a horse with like the little things with the eyes, like I just wouldn't have seen them. So yeah, it's like, I think it's
funny,
like a give and take.
It's so funny because, again, only the very fine eyes were capable to come back to me. And I remember the Tokyo show.
Oh yeah,
I had a few people that came to me, and where are the paintings? And I'm like, actually, it's all painted.
Yeah.
But people weren't able to see it because it was so micromanaged, let's say, and so detailed that really looked like it was made by a computer, but actually it was all
Anna, in the show, let's come back a little to your show in Berlin that we just saw. There's a lot of, actually in your painting there's always a lot of flowers. So why is the motive of the flower so important for you?
Well, I think this is something that I touched upon briefly in our conversation that we had at the opening, at the preview, that flowers have always been something that they've always fascinated me, but up until a certain point, like I just had this perception, and I think maybe somewhat of like a I was maybe influenced by certain people in my previous years that like it's just kind of like who gives a fuck, it's banal. Like, sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but like I just didn't really give them much attention until I arrived at Marnie. And sorry to bring the bridge again, but there are so many bridges to Marnie and Francesco, that like I just saw and had I gained, I think, during this time, like a confidence in things that I like, in things that make me the person who I am. And one of them is that I like flowers. And seeing Francesco and the team work with flowers in so many different variations, like I just had this perception of flowers or, like whatever, who cares? Like it's just this little like thing, like it grows, it dies, like whatever. But they can convey so many emotions. They can be extremely powerful. They can be super bitchy. They can be vicious. They can be, blunt. They can have so many different emotions. And that's when I realized that, like, man, it's been there in my practice all along. I can own it, like I can convey these different feelings that I have with them. And and I think in my own work, like they've just become this staple point that I find I am somehow proudly in the moment where I am right now able to transport the feelings that I perhaps have about the people I'm surrounded with, myself, the world. I think with the way that I'm able to paint them, I can bring across different emotions, maybe a certain, typology of beauty that I see in the world and in the people who I surround myself with. And I think that's why, let's say for now, I paint them a lot and they've become a staple within my work. And I think I don't even know how to say it. Like, I just think I paint them a lot right now because I have found this joy and this confidence and this fearlessness through working with Francesco that has empowered me to take something that I feel so precious about and to just not be shy about it anymore, Like, I think that's something that I took along from my years at Marnie too with you, Francesco, is this fact of, like, don't be shy about things. Like, be fearless. And I think when I came from my MA, I was still being very shy about things, obviously when you're, a few years younger and you just come out of school and you're a bit like, ooh, like, I don't know. But now I feel really like, okay, like, watching you work in the studio, like cut fearlessly, like into garments, like, just really like ruthlessly sometimes. I was like, whoa, like that's how fearless I want to be. And I try to
Okay,
take
that's
that
nice.
on in my own.
So yeah, it's all about learning from the one sphere to the other. Maybe one last thing, because we're just already quite advanced in the time. What is that the fashion industry could learn from the arts? Anna, you told me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, we're in a moment right now where I think also we've briefly touched upon it, is that, everything has become kind of faceless, soulless, way too fast. We're living in a moment where everything is just about selling, 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 and we've forgotten that actually the objects that we've created, we have this amazing human gift to give them a certain touch through our human presence. And like, I have certain works that you can see in my exhibition right now, predominantly these embroideries that I've made, these extremely like time intense embroideries that I have purposefully done like over years. Like there's one tapestry that I made, I've worked on it for 3 years, and it's just like that. Like, I don't see, or let's say I try to not let myself get put under pressure specifically with these works, because I use them almost as like how do you say it? Like a contrast, like an antidote in a way to the way that this industry works, which is everything's extremely fast. Everything needs to be industrial producible. Everything, it's almost like you're trying to eliminate the hand out of everything. And I try to not do that specifically in some works. And even though they really some of these tapestries that I've been working on, like they piss me off sometimes. I'm like, why is it not faster? Like, this really annoys me. This really fucking annoys me. But then I remember why I'm doing them. And yeah, they're pieces that you can see currently in the exhibition at Jäger Art in the Brunnenstraße. And we did this wonderful work of carrying the space together, Francesco and I. Francesco gave me his, wonderful insights and, how to also layer the space. And I think that also contributes and highlights specifically these factors that I was just talking about, is like slowing down, layering objects over one another so that they really speak with each other. They're not just single entities that, lose like their emotional presence in a way. Yeah.
Great. So my last question to Francesco would be: you just stopped working for money after 10 years. Will there be a chance for you to slow down?
Yes. I mean, or let's say, I'm actually, let's say for me, it's, it's kind of innate to run fast, like a horse. I've always done it since I was a kid. And so it's not about me, but it's about what we can express with the things that we make. And while I was listening to Anna, I was thinking about, as I've also, lately I've also like restarted painting and making things in art, and of course, like the pace of it is completely different. You don't have to produce something every 3 months. That would be ridiculous, and actually it would burn the artist kind of mystery in 1 second. So I think in the same way fashion has burned its own mystery, and every brand, you can find it anywhere in any city. You don't have to explore anymore. You don't have to fight for it. You don't have to look through things. So in a way, I hope that the things that I'm about to approach to do will allow me to divert the sense of mystery, and the way clothes can get into cultures and into people without feeling like an imposition that every 6 months you have to digest, because I don't know anyone who's actually not fed up by it. So yes, I'm gonna definitely take a chance to myself to try to change the parameters. I've done it since I've always tried to go against the grain. That was one of the let's say the difficult dynamics sometimes, but also what made us kind of who we were in these years, in these 10 incredible years, which I'm extremely grateful for. And looking back how we were always trying to go against the grain, I'm so proud of it. So that's also innate in my nature. So I don't think I can go with the grain.
Okay, so I'm looking forward to see more of you, Anna and Francesco. And thank you so much for this great
Thank you so
talk.
much.
Thank you.
Elke Buhr im Gespräch mit Anna Deller-Yee und Francesco Risso. Deller-Yee zeigt gerade ihre erste Soloausstellung To Build a Home is True in der Berliner Galerie Jäger Art. Besichtigen könnt ihr sie noch bis zum 2. August. Neue Folgen von Kunst und Leben, dem Podcast in Kooperation mit dem Monopol-Magazin, den gibt es übrigens 2-mal im Monat, immer am Dienstag. In der kommenden Folge, da wird es ein bisschen lustig, magisch auch und vor allem absurd, denn es geht um fliegende Züge und Pilze. Was das mit Kunst zu tun hat, das hört ihr dann in der nächsten Folge, also gleich auf Folgen klicken und keine Inhalte mehr verpassen. Produziert hat diese Episode Tim Schmutzler. Und mein Name ist Sarah Marie Plikat. Ich sage Tschüss und bis zum nächsten Mal.
Kunst und Leben. Der Monopol-Podcast von Detektor.fm.